The crystal chandelier above the private dining room cast fractured light across the faces of 12 of the most powerful venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, men and women who wouldn't have known Maya Thompson's name if their lives depended on it. But Maya knew all of their names. She knew how they took their coffee, which ones tipped and which ones didn't, who was having affairs and who was about to get divorced. You learn these things when you're invisible. She was clearing the dessert plates from the quarterly investor dinner at Merchants & Covers, San Francisco's most exclusive private dining club, when CEO Jonathan Hartley said it. Not to her, never to her directly, but about her, as if she were a piece of furniture with ears. The problem with this generation, Hartley was saying, swirling his bourbon, is they don't understand service. Real service. They think showing up and doing the minimum entitles them to a six-figure salary. He gestured vaguely in Maya's direction as she stacked plates. Look at the help. They do their job, they get paid, everyone's happy. Simple economics. No complaints, no drama. Venture capitalist Sandra Chen laughed uncomfortably. Jonathan, maybe I'm serious. You know what my grandfather told me? Some people are builders. Some people are servants. Know which one you are? And he was right. Society needs both. You can't have everyone at the table. Someone has to clear it. Maya's hands didn't shake. 23 years of waitressing had taught her that much. She finished stacking the plates, turned toward the kitchen, and kept her expression perfectly neutral. Because that's what you did when you were a 47-year-old black woman working in a world designed to remind you of your place. But as she pushed through the kitchen doors, something inside her cracked. Not violently, quietly, like ice on a lake just before it gives way. You good, Maya? Carlos, the sous chef, looked up from plating. Maya set down the dishes. That man just called me the help, like it's 1952. Hartley? Carlos shook his head. He's the worst. Last month he sent back a steak 3 times just to watch me sweat. Maya pulled off her service gloves. 23 years. She'd raised 2 daughters on these tips. Put one through nursing school. Survived her husband's death. Kept showing up. Kept smiling. Kept being invisible so white people could feel comfortable spending $400 on dinner. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like the night her grandmother described. The night you stop carrying other people's contempt and set it down. I'm going to play, Maya said quietly. Carlos froze. The piano? The piano. Maya, that's the owner's personal Steinway. Staff aren't allowed to touch it. You'll get fired, I know. She untied her apron. But I'm going to play anyway. To understand what happened next, how a waitress with a service tray ended up changing the trajectory of a billionaire's conscience, you have to go back. Back to a small house in Oakland. Back to a girl with a gift she was never supposed to waste her time developing. Back to the moment Maya Thompson learned that talent without opportunity is just another kind of silence. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever been underestimated because of the work you do. Oakland, California. The house on 42nd Street had thin walls, unreliable heating, and a piano. The piano was a mystery. Shirley Thompson, Maya's mother, worked double shifts as a hospital orderly and still barely made rent. She had no business owning a baby grand Yamaha that took up half their living room. But one day when Maya was 7, it appeared, delivered by 2 men who wouldn't say who'd paid for it, who just set it down and left. Mama, where did it come from? Maya asked, running her small hands across the keys. Shirley's face was unreadable. Someone who believed in not wasting gifts. That was all she'd say. Years later, Maya learned the truth. Her mother's employer, an elderly white woman named Mrs. Rothstein, had heard 7-year-old Maya humming complex melodies while waiting for her mother to finish work. Mrs. Rothstein, a former concert pianist whose hands no longer worked, had recognized something. She'd bought the piano, had it delivered anonymously, and died 3 months later without ever telling Shirley she'd done it. The gift changed everything and nothing. Maya was a prodigy. Not the kind anyone was looking for. She was black, poor, and female, but a prodigy nonetheless. By 9, she could play Chopin's nocturnes. By 11, she'd taught herself Rachmaninoff. By 13, she was composing her own pieces. Complex emotional landscapes that her high school music teacher said belonged in concert halls. "You should audition for the San Francisco Conservatory," Mr. Brennan told her parents at a school conference. "Maya has extraordinary talent. With proper training—" Shirley cut him off gently. "We can't afford conservatory. We can barely afford to keep her in public school. There are scholarships. Scholarships for girls like Maya." Shirley's voice was kind but firm. "Mr. Brennan, I appreciate your faith in my daughter, but the world doesn't give scholarships to black girls from Oakland who play piano. They give them to the children of people who already have money." She was right. Maya applied to 3 conservatory programs. She was rejected by all of them, not because of her talent, but because she couldn't afford the application fees for the pre-screening recordings, couldn't travel to auditions, couldn't present the complete artistic portfolio that required private lessons she'd never had. At 17, Maya won a local competition, the Oakland Young Artists Showcase. First prize was $500 and a performance slot at the Paramount Theater. She played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata and her own composition, a piece called Mama's Hands, that made half the audience cry. A music professor from UC Berkeley approached her afterward. "That was remarkable. Have you considered studying music?" "Can't afford it," Maya said simply. "But with your talent doesn't pay rent." The professor gave her his card, said to call if she changed her mind. Maya never called, because by then she understood something the professor didn't. The world had space for black women to serve, to clean, to care for other people's children. It did not have space for them to be artists. That space was reserved for people who could afford to believe talent was enough. At 18, Maya got pregnant. The father, Marcus, was a good man, a mechanic with steady work and gentle hands. They married young, had a second daughter 2 years later. Marcus supported Maya's music as much as they could afford, which meant she played at church on Sundays and at family gatherings, but never on stages that mattered. She worked as a waitress because the hours were flexible and the tips were good. Marcus worked overtime. They raised their girls, Shanice and Taryn, in a small apartment with that same Yamaha piano crammed against one wall. Maya taught her daughters to play, taught them that music was a gift you carried inside yourself, even when the world had no use for it. When Shanice was 12, she asked her mother, "Mama, why don't you play for real? Like on stages and stuff?" Maya was folding laundry. She set down one of Marcus's work shirts. "Baby, I do play for real. I play at church. I play for you girls. I play for Daddy. That's real. But you could be famous. Ms. Henderson says you play better than people on the radio." Maya pulled her daughter close. "Famous doesn't pay for your braces, baby girl. Famous doesn't keep the lights on. And famous definitely doesn't care about a middle-aged black woman from Oakland who never had the right connections." She wasn't bitter when she said it. It was just truth, stated plainly, the way you'd describe weather. When Marcus died suddenly at 49, an aneurysm, gone before the ambulance arrived, Maya's world fractured. The life insurance wasn't much. Shanice was in nursing school. Taryn was starting community college. Maya picked up extra shifts, worked banquets and private events, learned to make herself invisible in rooms where her presence made wealthy white people uncomfortable. She was good at it. 23 years good. Good enough that Merchants & Co., the most exclusive dining club in San Francisco, hired her for their elite private dining room, where tech billionaires and venture capitalists made deals that shaped the future while she poured their wine and cleared their plates. The club had a piano, a Steinway Model D Concert Grand. worth over $200,000, sitting in the corner of the main dining room like a museum piece. Maya had never touched it. Staff weren't allowed. It was there for ambiance. For the quarterly performances they hired professional pianists to give. But Maya walked past it every shift, and every shift it called to her. She knew what her hands could do with those keys. She knew the music sleeping inside her, music she'd never had the platform to share. Tonight, walking out of that kitchen, Maya stopped caring about platforms. She stopped caring about permission. She stopped caring about anything except the truth that had been building in her chest for 47 years. She was not just a servant. She had never been just anything. The dining room was winding down. Investors were finishing their drinks, voices loud with bourbon confidence and the self-satisfaction of men who'd just closed a $50 million deal. Jonathan Hartley was holding court at the head of the table, telling a story about disrupting the hotel industry. Maya walked past them, straight to the piano. She didn't ask permission. She didn't make an announcement. She simply sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. The room didn't notice immediately. Jonathan Hartley was mid-sentence, which is why legacy businesses always fail. They can't innovate. They're stuck in old paradigms of service. Maya played the opening notes of Beethoven's Piano Sonata. Number, the Moonlight Sonata. The conversation died, not slowly, instantly, as if someone had cut the power to the room's vocal cords. Because what came from that piano wasn't background music. It wasn't pleasant ambiance for rich people's conversations. It was fury and grief and beauty so precise, it felt like a scalpel cutting through pretense. Maya's hands moved across the keys with the authority of someone who'd spent 40 years in conversation with music, who'd played in church basements and at kitchen tables and in the hollow hours after her husband died. She played the first movement, that haunting, moonlit meditation, with technical perfection and emotional devastation. Jonathan Hartley turned in his chair. His face was confusion first, then recognition, then something else. Discomfort. Because the woman playing was the woman he'd just dismissed as the help, and she was playing like someone who'd swallowed an ocean and was letting it pour out through her. Fingertips, Sandra Chen whispered. Is that the waitress? Someone confirmed. Maya didn't stop. She moved into the second movement, the interlude that dances between darkness and light, technically demanding, full of rapid passages that would trip up amateur players. Her hands flew. Not a single note missed. Not a single moment of hesitation. The third movement, the presto agitato, storm music. Music that felt like rage, like years of being invisible, like every time someone looked through her instead of at her. The notes crashed and cascaded, and Maya's hands were a blur, and the music was so loud and so true that people in the main dining room stopped eating to listen. She finished. Let the final chord fade. Silence held the room like a held breath. Then Maya began to play her own composition, the piece she'd written in the weeks after Marcus died, in the nights when her daughters were asleep and the apartment was too quiet. She called it Unseen. No one had ever heard it except her family. It started soft, a simple melody in a minor key, the kind of music that feels like morning. Then it built layers of complexity, harmonies that shifted and twisted, a bass line that felt like a heartbeat. The music told a story of hands that served dinner and raised children and played piano when no one was watching, of talent buried under necessity, of dignity maintained in the face of dismissal, of being human in a world that only saw your function. Jonathan Hartley's face changed as he listened. The smug certainty drained away, replaced by something raw. His eyes were wet. Other investors were crying too. Sandra Chen covered her mouth. A man Maya didn't know was shaking his head slowly, as if arguing with himself. Maya played for 7 minutes. When she finished, she stood up, walked past the table of stunned silence, and headed back toward the kitchen. Jonathan Hartley found his voice. "Wait!" Maya stopped. Turned, Hartley stood up. His face was destroyed. That's the only word for it. The mask of control was gone. He looked like a man who'd just been shown something he'd spent his whole life avoiding. "What's your name?" he asked. "You've been here 12 times in the last 3 months. You've never asked my name before." "I'm asking now." "Maya Thompson." "Ms. Thompson." His voice cracked. He couldn't finish. He wiped his eyes. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "My living room, my church. Places people like you don't see." The room was silent. Every investor watching this exchange like it was a performance they hadn't bought tickets for. "I called you the help," Hartley said. "I said—" He couldn't repeat it. "I'm sorry." Maya looked at him. Really looked. She saw past the designer suit, the tech billionaire confidence, the assumption of superiority. She saw a man who'd just been forced to confront his own cruelty. "Mr. Hartley, you're not sorry you said it. You're sorry you were wrong." The silence after Maya's words was absolute. Jonathan Hartley stood there, CEO worth $3.2 billion, face of 3 successful tech companies, featured on magazine covers, looking like a man who'd been punched in the soul. Sandra Chen broke the quiet. "Jonathan, sit down." "No." He kept his eyes on Maya. "Ms. Thompson, you're right. I've been coming here for months, and I never asked your name. I never wondered if you had a life outside this room. I never considered that you might be—" He gestured helplessly at the piano. "That you might be anything other than what I decided you were." Maya said nothing. She'd learned long ago that powerful people talking through their guilt was its own kind of performance. They needed you to absolve them so they could go back to feeling good about themselves. But Hartley surprised her. "I need to know something. How many times has someone done this to you? Dismissed you like I just did? You want me to count?" "Yes," Maya laughed, a sharp, exhausted sound. "Mr. Hartley, I'm a 47-year-old black woman who's been waiting tables for 23 years. People dismiss me before I even open my mouth. They see my uniform and my skin, and they decide they know everything about me. So how many times? Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands." She turned to leave again. "I want to hire you." Hartley's voice was urgent. Maya stopped. "Excuse me? To play? To perform? I run several companies. We have events, fundraisers, shareholder meetings. I want to hire you as our official pianist. Name your price." The other investors shifted uncomfortably. Sandra Chen looked like she wanted to interrupt but didn't know how. Maya turned back slowly. "You want to hire me to play piano at your corporate events?" "Yes. Ms. Thompson, what you just played was extraordinary. That should be heard. You should be performing, not serving. And 5 minutes ago, I was the help who needed to know my place." Hartley flinched. "I know. That's why I'm trying to—" "To what? Fix it? Make yourself feel better? You think offering me a job erases what you said?" "No, but—" "Mr. Hartley." Maya's voice was calm but sharp. "Let me tell you something about men like you. You think generosity is the same as respect. You think because you suddenly see value in me, now that I've proven I'm not just a waitress, that means you've evolved. But you haven't. You've just recalibrated what kind of servant I'm allowed to be. Yesterday I served your food. Tomorrow I serve your need for cultural sophistication. I'm still here for your benefit." The room was frozen. No one had ever talked to Jonathan Hartley like this. No one dared. Sandra Chen spoke softly. "She's right, Jonathan." Hartley looked at her, stunned. "She's right," Sandra repeated. "You're trying to fix your guilt by commodifying her talent. You don't want to hire her because she deserves the opportunity. You want to hire her because it makes you feel like you're not the person who said those things." Another investor, Michael Reeves, a Harvard MBA with a reputation for brutal deal-making, surprised everyone by nodding. "I've been sitting here thinking about what you said, Maya. about being dismissed thousands of times. I did it tonight. I didn't see you as a person. I saw you as furniture. And that's— He stopped. That's inexcusable. Maya looked at each of them. These people who controlled billions of dollars, who shaped markets, who decided which companies lived and which died. And in this moment, they looked small. You all want to know what I need? Maya said. I don't need your guilt. I don't need your job offers. I don't need you to suddenly see me as valuable because I can do something that impresses you. What I need is for you to understand that I was valuable before I played that piano, that every person who serves you is valuable. That human worth isn't determined by whether someone can perform for your entertainment. Jonathan Hartley sat down heavily. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I don't know how to fix what I said. I don't know how to undo— You can't undo it, Maya said simply. You can only do better going forward. But that's not my problem to solve for you. She walked back toward the kitchen. This time, no one stopped her. Carlos was waiting by the door. You're fired, aren't you? Probably. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Maya pulled her apron back on. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally hitting. I spent 40 years being quiet, Carlos. 40 years making myself small, so other people could feel big. I'm tired. You're not small, Maya. You never were. They were just too busy looking at themselves to notice. The next morning, Maya's phone started ringing at 6 a.m. First call was from Arthur Mitchell, the owner of Merchants & Co. Ms. Thompson. I need you to come in. We need to discuss what happened. Maya's stomach dropped. I understand. I'll clean out my locker. What? No, Maya, I'm not firing you. I want to apologize. She sat down on her bed. Apologize? I've owned this club for 32 years. I hired you because you're professional, reliable, and skilled at your job. What I didn't know, what I should have known, is that you're also an extraordinary musician. That Steinway has been sitting there for decoration for 3 years. I'd like to offer you a position as our club pianist if you're interested. With a significant salary increase and full benefits, you would perform 3 nights a week, and we'd adjust your schedule so you're playing, not serving. Maya was silent. Ms. Thompson, why are you doing this? Mitchell paused. Because Jonathan Hartley called me at midnight last night and told me what happened. He was devastated. He said you were the most talented musician he'd ever heard, and that he'd treated you like you were invisible. He asked me— No, he begged me to find a way to keep you at the club, but in a role that honored your abilities. He offered to personally fund the salary increase. I don't want his guilt money. It's not guilt money, Maya. I listened to the recording from last night. We record all our private dining rooms for quality assurance. What you played was, I've been hiring professional musicians for years. You're better than most of them. This isn't charity. This is me finally doing what I should have done years ago if I'd been paying attention. Maya felt tears pressing behind her eyes. Mr. Mitchell, I'm 47. I spent my whole life being told I was too old, too late, too black, too working class to be a real musician. Now you're telling me I can perform? Why now? Because someone finally listened, Mitchell said quietly. And I'm ashamed it took this long. The second call came an hour later. Sandra Chen. Ms. Thompson, my name is Sandra Chen. I was at the dinner last night. I run a venture capital firm called Zenith Partners. We fund arts organizations, among other things. I'd like to discuss an opportunity with you. Maya, still processing Mitchell's offer, said, What kind of opportunity? There's a nonprofit called Second Act Arts. They provide performance opportunities and career support for older artists, people who didn't get traditional access to music, education, or whose careers were interrupted by life circumstances. I'm on the board. We have a showcase series at Davies Symphony Hall. Small venue, intimate performances. I'd like to feature you as our next performer. No strings attached, no favors needed. Just a platform for your music. Why? Maya asked directly. Because last night, I watched Jonathan Hartley, one of the most powerful men I know, realize he'd been cruel to someone whose talent he couldn't even conceive of. And I realized I do the same thing. I walk past people every day. People who serve me food, who clean my office, who watch my children. And I never ask them who they are, what their stories are, what they're capable of. You showed me my own blindness. This is my small attempt to see better. The third call was from Taryn, her younger daughter. Mama, what did you do? What do you mean? Someone posted a video from last night. You're going viral. There's a TikTok with 2 million views of you playing that Beethoven piece. The comments are insane. Everyone's trying to figure out who you are. Maya pulled up TikTok. There it was, grainy video from someone's phone, capturing the moment Maya sat at that piano and started playing. The caption, "Waitress at fancy dinner just destroyed this Beethoven." She was invisible to them until this. Who is she? The comments were a flood. This is why you respect everyone. You never know who you're dismissing, the way she plays with so much feeling. This woman is a real artist. Rich people treating service workers like they're nothing until they do something that benefits the rich. Tale as old as time. I need to know her story. Someone find this woman. That's not just skill, that's soul. She's carrying something heavy in that music. By noon, Maya had calls from 3 classical music agents, 2 documentary filmmakers, and a journalist from the San Francisco Chronicle who wanted to write her profile. By evening, she was sitting in her apartment, overwhelmed, staring at her old Yamaha piano. Shanice came over after her nursing shift, sat beside her mother on the bench. Mama, you okay? I don't know what I am. You're famous. I don't want to be famous. I wanted to play the piano. There's a difference. Shanice put her head on her mother's shoulder. You've been playing for 40 years where no one could hear you. Maybe it's time people listened. 2 weeks later, Maya performed at Davies Symphony Hall as part of the Second Act Arts Showcase. The 275-seat venue was sold out, partially because of the viral video, partially because word had spread through San Francisco's classical music community that something remarkable was happening. Jonathan Hartley was in the audience, 5th row. He'd asked for a ticket, and Maya had said yes, not because she'd forgiven him, but because she wanted him to see her on her own terms, not as someone serving his table. She played 4 pieces. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the piece that started everything. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, No. 2, a Bach prelude. And finally, her own composition, Unseen, which she'd expanded and refined. When she played Unseen, the room was absolutely still. The piece told her story without words. The years of being overlooked. The music trapped inside. The moment of breaking free. It was technically demanding and emotionally devastating, she finished. The audience erupted. Standing ovation. People crying openly. In the reception afterward, musicians approached her. A pianist from the San Francisco Symphony. A professor from the conservatory. A composer whose work Maya had admired for years. Where did you study? The composer asked. I didn't, Maya said. I learned in my living room. That's impossible. It's true. The composer stared at her. You're self-taught? All of this is? You've never had formal training? I've had the best training, Maya said. I've been playing every day for 40 years. I just didn't have the right audience until now. Jonathan Hartley approached hesitantly. Ms. Thompson, thank you for letting me attend. Mr. Hartley. I wanted you to know. That night changed me. Not in some performative way. I mean, it fundamentally altered how I see people. I've been examining my entire life. How I treat employees. How I think about service workers. How I've built companies on the backs of people I never bothered to see as human. I'm working with a consultant now, restructuring our corporate culture, implementing policies to ensure service staff are valued. I know that doesn't undo what I said to you, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to be different." Maya studied him. He looked tired, less polished, more human. "Mr. Hartley, do you know why I played that night?" "No, because I'd had enough. 47 years of being invisible. 23 years of serving people who looked through me. I wasn't trying to teach you a lesson. I wasn't trying to change you. I was trying to be seen, by myself, more than anyone else, to prove to myself that I was real, that my music mattered, that I was more than what people decided I was." Hartley nodded. "Did it work?" "Yes, but not because of how people responded. Because I finally gave myself permission to exist fully." "I'm grateful," Hartley said quietly. "Not for what you did for me, but for what you did for yourself. And I'm sorry it took my cruelty for you to reach that point." "Don't be sorry," Maya said. "Be better, and hold other people to being better. That's how you honor what happened." 3 months after that performance, Maya's life had transformed, but not in the ways people expected. She kept her position at Merchants and Cairns, but now she performed 3 nights a week on that Steinway. The club promoted her as their featured artist, and reservations became coveted. People came specifically to hear her play. She also kept her waitressing shifts 2 nights a week. When people asked why, when she was now making enough to quit, she said simply, "Because it's honest work, and I'm good at it, and because I refuse to forget where I come from." She performed monthly at Second Act Arts. The program, energized by her story and Sandra Chen's increased funding, began featuring more overlooked artists. A 62-year-old immigrant violinist, a 70-year-old self-taught painter, a 55-year-old poet who'd spent 30 years as a bus driver. A documentary filmmaker followed Maya for 6 months, creating a short film called Unseen, the Maya Thompson Story. It premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival and won the Audience Award. The film didn't just focus on her musical talent, it explored the systematic ways society renders service workers invisible, the class dynamics of American culture, the racial barriers that keep Black artists from accessing traditional training institutions. The Chronicle article went deeper. The journalist, a woman named Rachel Kim, interviewed Maya's daughters, her former co-workers, the people who'd known her music in church basements and community centers. The piece wasn't about a waitress becoming a musician. It was about how she'd always been a musician. The world just hadn't bothered to notice. Maya received a call from the San Francisco Conservatory. They wanted to offer her a position teaching piano to adult learners and late-career artists. "We've realized," the dean told her, "that we've been serving a very narrow population. We want to expand access to people like you, people with extraordinary talent who didn't have traditional opportunities. We'd like you to help us build that program." Maya accepted. Not because she needed validation from institutions that had rejected her, but because she could help other invisible artists find their voices. The most meaningful change was smaller. Carlos, the sous chef from Merchants and Cairns, mentioned that he'd been writing poetry since he was a teenager. Maya asked to read it. His poems were beautiful. Raw, honest observations about immigrant life, working in kitchens, watching wealthy people from the shadows. "Why don't you share these?" Maya asked. "Who's going to listen to a cook's poetry?" Maya smiled. "Funny. I used to ask myself who'd listen to a waitress's piano music." She connected Carlos with Second Act Arts. 6 months later, he performed at a spoken word showcase. His work was powerful enough that a small press offered to publish his collection. At that performance, Maya watched from the audience. Shanice sat beside her. "You started something, Mama," Shanice whispered. "People are seeing us now." "No," Maya corrected gently. "We were always visible. We just stopped letting them look away." A year after that night at Merchants & Co., Maya was invited to speak at a TED conference. The topic? The cost of invisibility. She stood on that stage, a woman who'd spent most of her life being overlooked, and told the truth. "When that video went viral," she began, People called me brave. They said I'd stood up to power, that I'd demanded recognition. But that's not what happened. What happened was simpler and more complicated. I played the piano because I needed to prove to myself that I existed. She paused. For 23 years, I was a waitress. And there's nothing wrong with being a waitress. It's honest work that requires skill, patience, and grace under pressure. But in our society, service work is treated as invisible work. The people who do it are seen as interchangeable, temporary, not worth knowing. I learned to make myself invisible because visibility was dangerous. When you're a black woman serving wealthy white people, being noticed often means being criticized. Being invisible meant safety. It meant keeping my job. It meant surviving. But invisibility has a cost. When you train yourself to be unseen, you start to disappear, even from yourself. You forget that you're more than your function. You forget that you contain multitudes. You forget that you're human. The night I played that piano, I wasn't trying to teach anyone a lesson. I was trying to remember myself, to prove that the music inside me was real, that the person I'd been before I learned to be invisible still existed. She looked out at the audience. Tech executives, artists, activists, academics. Here's what I learned. Talent is everywhere. Genius is everywhere. Extraordinary people are working in kitchens and driving buses and cleaning offices and raising children and doing all the invisible labor that keeps society functioning. They're not there because they lack ability. They're there because systems of class, race, gender, and access determine who gets to develop their talents and who has to bury them. When powerful people suddenly discover someone like me, they treat it like a miracle. Look at this waitress who can play piano. But I'm not a miracle. I'm what happens when talent survives despite the system, not because of it. And for every person like me who gets noticed, there are thousands who don't. Thousands of invisible people with invisible gifts that die with them. So if you're sitting here thinking I'm inspirational, stop. Don't be inspired by me. Be furious that it took 47 years and a viral video for anyone to care about my music. Be angry that my daughters watched their mother's talent be wasted because we were too busy surviving to pursue anything else. Be outraged that this story is remarkable instead of ordinary. And then do something about it. Ask the people who serve you their names. Notice the humans behind the functions. Create systems that allow people to develop their abilities, regardless of their economic circumstances. Pay service workers enough that they can afford to be more than their jobs. Build a society where talent doesn't have to go viral to matter. She smiled. Not a happy smile, but a knowing one. Because I guarantee you, the person who serves your coffee tomorrow, the person who cleans your office tonight, the person who watches your children while you're at work, they contain universes. They have dreams and gifts and stories that would break your heart if you bothered to ask. They're not waiting to be discovered. They're waiting to be seen as human beings who matter whether or not they can perform for your entertainment. Don't let it take a dramatic piano performance for you to see them. See them now. See them always. Because invisibility isn't just cruel, it's a tremendous waste of human potential, and we can't afford to keep wasting it. The applause was thunderous, but Maya wasn't finished. One more thing, she said, waiting for the room to quiet. Jonathan Hartley, the man who called me the Help, is here today. He asked to attend. I said yes, because I wanted to tell you what he did after that night. The room went silent. He didn't just apologize. He restructured his company's employment practices. He implemented living wages for all service staff. Not minimum wage, living wages. He created pathways for hourly employees to access professional development, education benefits, and career advancement. He established an employee dignity council where service workers have equal voice with executives. And he did all of this not for good press. He did it quietly, without announcement, because he was genuinely ashamed of who he'd been. She looked toward where Hartley sat, his face unreadable. I don't tell you this to absolve him. What he said was cruel, and his actions were the bare minimum of what decent people should do. But I tell you this, because change is possible. Powerful people can learn to see. It shouldn't require a dramatic confrontation. It shouldn't take a viral video. But if it does, if that's what it takes for you to recognize the humanity of the people you've been overlooking, then be like Jonathan. Don't just feel guilty, do better, build better. Because in the end, being seen isn't about me. It's about all of us. Every person society has taught you to ignore. We're here. We've always been here. We're just waiting for you to look. 2 years after that TED Talk, Maya Thompson's life looked different, but felt familiar. She still lived in Oakland, in a slightly bigger apartment that could properly fit the Yamaha. She still taught at the conservatory 2 days a week. Her adult learners program had grown to 50 students, many of them service workers taking evening classes. She still performed at Merchants & Coders 3 nights a week, though now she also played concert halls quarterly. But the most important thing she did, the thing she was proudest of, was the program she'd started with Sandra Chen's funding and Jonathan Hartley's initial investment. It was called the Scene Collective, a nonprofit dedicated to providing performance opportunities, career support, and professional development for artists who'd been systematically excluded from traditional pathways, people working service jobs, people without formal training, people over 40, people who'd been told they were too late or too poor or too something to pursue their art seriously. The collective had chapters in 12 cities now. They'd helped launch the careers of a 59-year-old janitor who was a brilliant sculptor, a 42-year-old home health aide who wrote novels, a 65-year-old security guard who composed orchestral music. People whose gifts had been invisible were finally being seen. Maya's daughters were involved. Shanice, now a nurse practitioner, served on the board and worked to connect healthcare workers with the program. Taryn, finishing her MFA in Arts Administration, ran the Oakland chapter. One evening, Maya was at the conservatory when a student approached her after class. The woman was in her 50s, black, tired-looking. She worked as a hospital custodian and was taking Maya's piano class on scholarship. "Ms. Thompson, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do you still work at the restaurant?" "Everyone knows who you are now. You could just perform, just teach. Why do you still serve tables?" Maya set down her sheet music. "What's your name?" "Denise." "Denise, why do you still work at the hospital? You could take more hours here, focus on music." "Because I have bills. Because I need the health insurance. Because that job is stable." "Exactly," Maya said. "And also because there's dignity in the work, right? You keep that hospital clean, you help people heal. That matters," Denise nodded. "I still waitress," Maya continued, "because I refuse to forget what it feels like to be dismissed. The moment I become only a performer, only a teacher, the moment I stop being the person who serves tables, I risk becoming the person who looks through service workers instead of at them. That job keeps me honest. It reminds me who I am and where I come from." She smiled. "But also, I'm genuinely good at it. And there's nothing wrong with being good at honest work." Denise's eyes filled. "I've been feeling ashamed. Like I should be past this by now, like I should have made it already." "Made it where?" Maya asked gently. "Denise, you're here. You're learning. You're doing something you love alongside something that pays your bills. That's not failure. That's survival with grace. That's having dreams while living in reality. There's no shame in that. But you made it." "I didn't make it. I got noticed. There's a difference. I was always making it. I was making it every day I played piano in my apartment and raised my daughters and kept my dignity while people treated me like furniture. Making it doesn't look like what they show you in movies. Sometimes making it looks like still being here, still playing, still believing your music matters, even when the world takes 47 years to agree." On the 3rd anniversary of that viral video, Maya performed a special concert at Davies Symphony Hall. Full house, 732 seats. Everyone filled. The program featured her original compositions, 12 pieces she'd written over 4 decades. Music that had lived in her apartment and her church, and the quiet spaces where invisible people create invisible art. Before the final piece, Maya spoke to the audience. "Tonight, I'm going to play a new composition. I wrote it last month, and it's called We Were Always Here. It's dedicated to every person who was told they were too late, too old, too poor, too different to pursue their dreams. To everyone working service jobs while carrying genius inside them. To all the invisible artists who keep creating even though the world isn't watching. I want to tell you something I've learned. Being seen is good. Having opportunities is good. But it's not what makes you valuable. You were valuable before anyone noticed. You are valuable whether or not anyone ever notices. Your gifts matter because they're yours, not because someone validated them. For 40 years, I played piano where no one could hear. Those weren't wasted years. That was my life. Raising my children, serving my community, developing my craft, being human in all the ways that matter. The fact that the world finally paid attention doesn't make those years suddenly count. They always counted. She sat at the piano, placed her hands on the keys. This is for everyone who's still invisible. I see you. Keep going. Your time will come. And if it doesn't, if you spend your whole life playing piano in your living room, or writing poetry in your kitchen, or painting in your garage, that's enough. Being witnessed by the masses isn't what makes art matter. Being true to yourself is, she played. The music was transcendent, technically perfect, and emotionally shattering. It told the story of invisible people who'd always been visible to each other, who'd created beauty in the margins, who'd maintained their humanity in systems designed to reduce them to functions. When she finished, the applause went on for 5 minutes. But Maya barely heard it, because in the front row, she saw them. Carlos from the restaurant, who'd published his poetry collection. Denise from her piano class, tears streaming down her face. 3 of her former co-workers from the early days, women who'd served alongside her for years, who'd never gotten their viral moment, but who lived with the same grace and dignity Maya had learned from them. They were standing, clapping, glowing with something that looked like recognition. Not recognition of her success, recognition of themselves in her story. Visible, finally, even if only to each other. After the concert, Maya didn't go to the reception. She went back to her apartment in Oakland, sat at her old Yamaha, the mysterious piano that had appeared when she was 7, the gift from a woman who'd seen something worth nurturing. She played quietly, for no audience, no recording, no purpose, except the pure act of making music. Her phone buzzed, a text from Shanice. "Mama, you were incredible. I'm so proud of you." Another from Taryn. "You changed the world tonight." One from Jonathan Hartley. "Thank you for showing me how to be human." Maya set down her phone, looked at her reflection in the window. A 50-year-old black woman in a modest apartment, hands on piano keys, exactly where she'd always been. She smiled. Not because she'd been discovered, not because she was finally visible, but because she'd never stopped being herself, even when no one was watching. That was the real triumph. Not the performance, not the applause, not even the changed policies or the launched careers or the nonprofit helping invisible artists. The triumph was simpler. She had refused to disappear. She had kept her music alive in the margins until the margins expanded to let her through. And now she was using that platform not to celebrate her own emergence, but to illuminate all the people still standing in the shadows, still creating, still dreaming, still magnificent in their invisibility. Because the truth is this: the world is full of Maya Thompsons, full of people with extraordinary gifts buried under economic necessity and systemic exclusion, full of artists serving your dinner, cleaning your offices, watching your children, driving your buses, full of humans you walk past every day without seeing. They don't need you to discover them. They need you to build a world where they don't have to go viral to matter, where talent doesn't require validation from the powerful to be worth developing, where service work is respected and compensated enough that people can afford to be more than their jobs. They need you to see them now, before the dramatic moment, before the viral video, before the performance that finally proves they're human, because they were always human. They were always here. They were always worthy. You just weren't looking. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? And have you ever been invisible to someone who should have seen you? Because sometimes the most powerful position isn't at the head of the table. It's being the person brave enough to exist fully in a world that would rather you disappear. And sometimes the person who changes everything isn't the one who gets discovered. It's the one who never stops creating, even in the dark, even without witnesses, even when the only audience is themselves and the music that refuses to die inside them.